It's gonna be outside.
East to west, not west to east.
I understand. So there's no part of the thing.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I tell you, Joyce is getting better. And she, today.
Hi, is there a land use card that we usually follow as far as? I talked about this. Yes, I got, you wanna pass that on to Patty? See one in front of me. We used to. Should your day at work? I'm sure you Jim?
Wild child.
Okay. I don't see it out, so I'll just have to use my knuckles. 7:02, Sheridan.
Recording
City
in progress.
Sheridan City Council, I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Oops, now Peter had his hand up. Put that down. Sorry.
Council President, for the record, since we have a land use hearing tonight, would you mind stating the date?
Of September 6th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Hancock,
Here.
Buckles,
Here.
Hawk,
Here.
Hebert,
Here.
McElroy, Walker,
Here.
Mayor Rich Fox.
Thank you. Item 1, public comment period. The public comment portion of the agenda is the opportunity for the council to listen to the public, but not for dialogue. The public is allowed up to 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city. The topic or issue brought up may be referred by the council to the city manager for inclusion on a subsequent city agenda, council agenda. Council has the discretion to ask questions after the comments are concluded. Please note, complaints should first be addressed to the appropriate city department and/or the city manager prior to directly addressing the council. Joe Neely,
Here.
would you like to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joe Neely. I'm also known as the camera guy that goes around Sheridan. I can be either a fly on the wall or a fly in someone's ointment, however you want to see it. My concern is, since I've been out there a lot more often and a lot of the times it's good exercise, I'm noticing that there's some potential danger at the crosswalk in front of the Country Bargains on South Bridge Street. I'm thinking a lot of you are aware of this, but there's a lot of blind zones, especially since kids are going back into school. There are some SUVs that park there where visibility is hard to see people in general who are willing to cross. Vehicles are going fast. I just spoke to Kai one time, but it's mostly about visibility. So I would like to see some changes when it comes to maybe removing that parking spot, which is 6 feet from the crosswalk, where it's hard to see a pedestrian, because how close it is, at that location. So I see if there's any way that we can, as a city and a committee, adapt to the changing times of how fast cars are going and pedestrian safety by moving that spot to where it becomes one solid yellow line rather than just 6 feet from the crosswalk. I have a video on my channel showing how motorists blatantly, maybe not blatantly, but they drive excessively fast, even if someone's in the crosswalk, to where they don't stop or they barely stop, like maybe 10 feet from the bumper, and that's basically due to lack of visibility of pedestrians on the side of the left side, close to the cars.
It's a very good point, I think all of us realize that's one of the crosswalks in town.
And what street was that on, Joe?
South Bridge, mostly for northbound motorists. There's that spot that's right outside Country Gardens on the right side if you're leaving the store. It's about 6-foot yellow strip. On the other side, face the bridge, seems to go at least 15 feet of yellow strip. And there's usually tall vehicles that are parked right there. And as a photographer and people walking with me in the crosswalk and documenting this, I have concern about public safety.
Maybe we can talk with Clyde and city manager, there might be some striping or something we can do.
I would appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that too. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience want to speak?
I was asking if you'd like him to give an update on that.
Yes,
We
Clyde,
have time for that.
please.
I think that's what
I'll keep it brief.
Thanks,
Joe.
Thank you, Kai.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you,
So Joe's one of the people that's active in the community, and I think it's a pretty great thing what he's doing. I actually asked him, he was complaining about speeders, and I said, you know what, here's a good thing you can do about it, and then I saw a complaint on Facebook about him doing it. I just thought that was hilarious, he was out videotaping speeders, and people were complaining on Facebook. But where he's talking about, times do change. I was talking to ODOT recently about some speed changes here, and they've noticed their 85th percentile. So that's how they rate their speeds on streets, and that has ticked up 2 miles an hour in the past 4 years. And nobody's sure why that's happening, but given how much law enforcement we have now and what their priorities are, that would be my guess. So what Joe's talking about, that space is allowed so as you walk out, you're immediately in the southbound lane. That's why there's no parking spot there. Then as you venture out, you're still in the southbound lane, but people have time to see you headed northbound. However, cars are bigger, people are going faster. So those are all things, I just try and stay impartial in all this, but those are things to consider. And I'll be coming back, I'll talk to Heidi about it, and based on her direction, I'll do what I'll bring back to council. But I normally don't do takes without city manager instruction. So a take is taking something from the public. So I don't take parking spots, for example. That is a council decision or a city manager decision. I certainly do not make those. But I give the information to the city manager, and she can bring it to you, or I can bring it to you. You guys can make a decision however you want. But I just wanted to say that some of the other intersections you talked about too, not tonight, but with me, they've been that way for 100 years. And my first thought was, well, nobody's got killed there in 100 years. But then I just talked to him about the speeds being faster, the cars being bigger, and I was like, well, yeah, things do change. So I'll bring all that information back. But I just want to thank Joe also.
Thank you,
for
Kai.
taking the time.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to speak? Is there anyone on the telephone? Online? Hearing none? Item 2, we have no presentations tonight. I'm trying to drag my feet when I'm listening to council.
Council President, may I make a suggestion? Councilor Denny McRoy is very close
Yeah, he should be here just a few minutes.
Yes, and so I would like to see if we could start the public hearing after he gets here, so that he can be present for the full thing. Maybe we can move to item 4, the follow-up from the town hall on homelessness.
We'll do that and go back to item 3 when Billy gets back.
Yes, he should be here very soon.
Item 4, number A, follow-up on town hall on homelessness. Verbal update. Town manager.
Sure, we sent out all of the notices to people's mail, and we posted it around town and put it out on social media. But about halfway through, when we started hearing from people who had experienced homelessness, I realized that I should have done a better job at posting maybe in places where the homeless are, so that they had a better opportunity to come and speak. So it's kind of a garment moment. So I don't know if that is an effect where you want to have an opportunity to allow people, to write in comments at this point, or if there's something else that you want to do to try to engage the public. I thought we had a fairly good turnout for the event. Maybe we could have had a larger turnout for the event. I don't know. So I just wanted to gather the input from the city council, if you thought that was enough public engagement for you, and you're ready to move to the next phases, which would be starting to work on designing the plan, as the woman in the audience asked us about.
Well, I think it was a good start. I thought it was very well organized and, panels. I was a little bit late for that one, but, I thought it was, I think people were maybe a little shy. I think it would have been nice to have some of the people that were the victims of the circumstances give input, because it gives understanding. People who don't live that way or have to live that way or are forced to live that way. And I wish there had been a little bit more input for them, for us to digest that contemplation of, who better to help us, with certain needs than the victims. We don't suffer from it when we go home at night. They suffer with it every day. So, I thought it was a very organized and thought it was very well presented. I just had wished, even I wasn't sure what was to be said, you know what I'm saying? But I thought it was a good first step. One big toe in, maybe next week we could have three toes in, or the whole foot.
I was wondering if maybe we should put together some sort of a plan and then do another invitation back to the public.
Maybe they would be shy, or reserved, or
And we'll have
hesitant.
something to review and
Yes.
give their feedback
Yes.
on, more concrete. And what I thought was one of the things that I noticed that the public was looking more for.
I think they were looking for us to come up with something, even though we were looking for them to give us something.
Denny?
So, as it was said, this is just laying a foundation. So, we've kicked this around for a long time. Every town is kicking it around for a long time. So, boy, what's the answer to boy? That's what we're gonna work on. But at least it's a start, and I think the country realizing this is not gonna go away. And we gotta put some serious effort, I'm sorry, but serious money in it, to keep this back on track, get it back at least in control, because it's way out of control. Anyway, I thought it was a good start.
I'd like to see some more data, like from other cities our size, where they're at in this process, and what they are trying to consider, like we are, so that we can kind of be consistent, but I know there's no one answers. We're gonna have to look deep for it.
I think you make a good point, is that, we're set up, buy a motel and let them move in there. We don't have a motel to buy, and we don't have the money, so we've got to start at a lower bar. So what are the other small towns that are suffering like we are? What are they doing? I think that's what we need to know. It's great that Mendel has a lot of resources, but we shouldn't just say, let's just ship all our homeless people in, but I don't think that's the answer.
what's happening a lot is they're working regionally. Because we are starting to realize that it's not just a city problem, it's not, and it's more of an effort that has to be made with our partners and our nearby cities and the county. So from this, I think that it's really, I've been invited to start attending, it's more, it's like a homeless coalition, I suppose. It's a group that's developing. They say that they had reached out prior to Sheridan and nobody had jumped on it or nobody had attended. So I will start attending those, and then from there I'll also report back to you on what we're hearing. But I wonder if part of it will be, I don't know, but I think that the solution somewhere is working more collaboratively with local jurisdictions. If there is such a thing as a solution, maybe we should just send a plan. If there's a plan.
That workshop in Newport on October 17th would be something for that's up.
Is it through the league?
Yeah.
I'll get more information to the council.
Do you wanna think about a date on when we can plan another type of the town hall? I mean, I think we need to have a date in mind and have a aim for it and take something to the table so we can show the people that we're trying and we're looking for their affirmation or agreement or whatever it takes to help us take the next step to go forward.
Let's see, you have, the October, November, December work sessions, so that's essentially 3 work sessions to start to come up with something before you get to January. But I'll remind you that January is a time when we can be bringing in new counselors. And unfortunately, what happens with that is you kind of sometimes have to go backward to get people trained and back up to speed if there is change. So, maybe like February, because we also have to have time for legals to do their magic.
The thing of it is, we're gonna go through another winter. So what are we gonna do for the quote Band-Aid for this winter? That's why I think it might gonna be sooner than that, so that we can try to have something, even a temporary, something.
So if you want to start to do that, then I would advise you to perhaps have a separate council meeting where you're only going to talk about that.
Problem with that. You guys think?
Yeah, I like that idea, because it's not gonna fix itself, and we need to dedicate some time to it if we want to see some sort of potential solution, partial potential solution.
October, we're looking at, September 12th, which is next Monday, I think is too short to get everything together and the packet and all that, plus we have a planning commission meeting. And then the 19th is your full council meeting. We could just say, October 3rd is, how about we do this? How about we say October 3rd is the work session? And if anything else comes up on the agenda and it gets to be too much, then maybe we try to move the work session items to a different one. But at this point, we can try to reserve the October 3rd meeting for only discussion on homeless.
Will that give us enough time to gather some information to work with?
Yeah, I think so. I'm nervous that there's not as much as you hope there is.
I can do that too.
For smaller.
So we just have to originate something ourselves, so maybe be the shepherd, not the sheep,
Outside the box.
something.
So if you're thinking about like a shelter, you should just start to think about what your resources are in town. Probably a good effort is to invite all the church pastors and leadership to that meeting. So maybe we should have, so maybe that's the way to approach that, is for me to invite nonprofits and the churches to that meeting, and it's more of a resource gathering. Okay, I'll work on that.
table.
Otherwise, yeah, October 3rd. At 7 p.m.
Any more discussion?
And where do you wanna have that at, here? Here, there, or somewhere else?
I think a library community room might be good because it's a little bit larger and more like a
Some
circle
more
around
open,
town.
we might be able to. It's available to us, obviously. Is it hard to set up the microphones and the screens?
I don't think it's hard, it's just not the favorite, but it can be done. It was done many times.
Well, I think we have more room for.
We were actually having a picnic room in the end side. Yeah. Does the community room have Wi-Fi? Okay.
Just plan on the library then.
Can I ask one question? Do you think that this room is smaller than the one in the library?
No, I think they're probably about the same size. Ours might be a little bit longer.
But it's also a, yeah, there's less stuff.
Yeah.
So you can, what did we say, 30? You figured you could fit in there? And you can see each other. Is that a good space? Or we need it loose?
It's the same size as this, just so we can see each other.
The community, the library.
Okay, let's go back to the public hearing. Open hearing? Yeah, that's a, I'm having a hard time.
It's nice.
I know, what about the fan? Are we good with the fan on?
I think that's, okay.
Okay.
Does everybody else can hear better? Anyway, okay. We got a lot of it. All right.
We have to do the proceeding.
Good evening. My name is Roxy Acup. I am the council president, and I will be presiding over the hearing. The public hearing is now open. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of the appeal of the Planning Commission's affirmation of the administrative decision approving case number MHP 2022-01 for an 18-space manufactured home park in the R2 district. Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of each public hearing. The city planner will read the material. Your patience is appreciated as the statements are read. Jax.
Thank you, Council President. The applicable criteria upon which the case will be decided are found in the Sheridan Municipal Code, Section 16.556 for the manufactured home park standards, and Section 16.215 for the R2 district. The criteria are addressed in the staff report and will be summarized in the presentation of the staff report during this hearing. I should note that because this is an appeal of the original decision, a lot of these individual code requirements will not be summarized tonight and are not in this staff report, but they are in the original administrative decision from July 7, which is included in your packet, and then was affirmed by the Planning Commission's August 9 affirmation of that administrative decision. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which you believe to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision makers to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will proceed with the staff report, followed by the applicant and those in support of the application, followed by the appellants and supporters of the appellants. Then any parties with general comments or who are neither for or against the application will testify. The council or staff may question the applicant and those who testify. The applicant will be given an opportunity to rebut the testimony or evidence. If you have any documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must be formally placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please leave the material with the recorder, who will make sure your evidence is identified and placed in the record.
At this time, I need to ask the audience, are there any objections to the notice that was sent in this case? Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the city council to hear and make a decision on this appeal? And for the councilors, are there any declarations of ex parte contact, conflict, or bias by any members of the council?
I just wanted to disclose that I sold, I believe it's 608, parcel to Bob and Rosie Fleming, maybe 9 years ago. I was the realtor that represented them in that. Actually, I represented the Bonnies and the Flemings in that transaction. But I'm just disclosing that.
I don't believe that's technically a conflict of interest.
No, but I just want to say it, so just to be.
I was just saying for
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We're now ready for the staff report.
Thank you again, and I would like to enter the staff report and all its attachments into the record. And also, because there's previously been a planning commission hearing, there was material submitted into that hearing that is part of the record. And then going back to the original administrative decision, the application materials and the comment letters that were sent in during that process are also in the record. So this is somewhat similar to the annexation hearing a month or so ago. There's a lot here, and in this case it's an appeal where the appellants have specific items that are of concern to them. So I'm going to touch on everything, but hopefully I won't take a long time on more than just 2 or 3 items. So in the middle of the first page of the staff report, which in the packet is page 3 of 228 and 226, the attachments are listed. So the Fleming's appeal letter is at the back of the staff report. The Anderson appeal letter with about 2 dozen background pages of easements and plats and things. The applicant's response is the third attachment. And then the July 7th administrative decision, the original decision that approved the manufactured home park, followed by the August 9 Planning Commission order that affirmed the administrative decision's approval. And then the applicant's June 9 revised site plan is also in your materials. And it's there just to try to have a site plan with a little clearer lines on it. But mainly when we get to one of the pages here, the idea is it shows the subject property and it shows the manufactured home park's layout. So, the nature of the application is 2 appeals, one by Bob and Rosemary Fleming, another by Dean and Judy Anderson. And just to put you note, manufactured home park is abbreviated in the staff report, MHP. So whenever you see MHP, that's a manufactured home park. The applicant is Kevin Apperson of Atwell Company. They're a professional company with engineers and planners that represent developers. And in this case, they are representing the owner, 10K Doors LLC. And there's a little note here that when this application was first turned in, there was a different property owner. It was Fackler Properties of McMinnville. And since this process has started, they have sold, which was their original intent, to the 10K Doors company. So on page 4 of 226, toward the middle, the main heading, manufactured home park decision, the capitalized underlined heading, the third and fourth paragraphs, just mentions again that on July 7, the administrative decision was issued, subject to approval, subject to conditions. And then the Flemings and Andersons appealed the city manager's decision. The Planning Commission public hearing was scheduled. The Planning Commission had a hearing on August 8th and affirmed the administrative decision. And then the current appeals by the Flemings and Andersons ensued, and so we are here tonight. At the bottom of page 4, there's a short paragraph where the purpose of the city council hearing is for the council to consider only the issues raised in the 2 appeal letters and make a decision to affirm the Planning Commission order or affirm the Planning Commission order with changes. And then it comments that because the application proposes adding to the city, quote, needed housing, end quote, the option of reversing the PC order, i.e. denying the application, is not recommended. Moving on then to page 5, there's a major heading, about a third of the way down, statewide standards. The point here is that years ago, the Oregon Building Codes Division was given the authority by the legislature to adopt standards, statewide standards for manufactured home parks. So the statewide standards are in the Oregon Manufactured Dwelling and Park Specialty Code. And then the next paragraph comments that there's some flexibility in those regulations for cities to adopt their own regulations regarding a few issue, and there aren't too many that our Sheridan Development Code has adopted, but the point is the statewide standards do have some flexibility. And the last paragraph in that section talks about the Sheridan Development Code having 28 approval criteria, and cites the section. And then of those 28, item B calls for the manufactured home parks to comply with the Oregon Manufactured Dwelling Park Specialty Code, thereby making the Oregon Manufactured Dwelling and Park Specialty Code essentially the city's standards. So the rest of page 5 refers to a map on the next page, page 6, and it basically shows subject property in red. That's later referred to many times as tax lot 1601. And so you can see its shape isn't quite a square or a rectangle or a parallelogram, but it's called a flag lot because it kind of looks like a flag with a flagpole, although in this case, with the map showing north at the top, the flag is upside down. So please just turn your mind upside down, and it's a flag lot, and that's where the term comes from, and that's part of the issue tonight, is a flagpole, that skinny piece that runs from Sheridan Road at the top down into the property. One of the main issues is the Andersons contend that flagpole should be a public street. And that's not consistent with the Oregon Manufactured Dwelling Park Specialty Code, which allows manufactured home parks to be accessed via a private driveway. The wrinkle is that the Andersons own two properties on the east side, the right side of the flagpole, and so they need to have access on the flagpole to get out to Sheridan Road. And the 1992 easement grants them a 20-foot width along the east side of such property to get out to Sheridan Road. There are other easements and things that complicate the situation, but essentially that is what we're looking at. So on that map, the property to the left is labeled Fleming, and that's tax lot 1600. The properties to the east, there's 4 of them, and 2 of them really don't have an importance here. Certainly they're always important, particularly to the people who live there. But tax lots 1703 and 1702 are the 2 that are owned by the Andersons, and their name is labeling both of those as Anderson properties. So, I mentioned before that the original decision is included as an attachment, attachment 4, and so there, in the decision like that, there's a lot of basic information in the first 2 or 3, 4 pages, and rather than have you flipping pages to go see what that is, the next page, page 7 of 226, includes several items, and it's basically who the owner is, the applicant, the property location, what the request is, and in this case, the applicant was requesting a manufactured home park with 18 spaces, which is a pretty small park, but so the issue again tonight is the appeal of that approval. The parcel size is a little over 2 acres. Existing development, on the north end of the flagpole up by Sheridan Road, there is a public sewer line and a manhole that are something about 20 feet into the flagpole, and there's an easement there. So with the easement allowing the public sewer line and the public manhole, then the city's public works employees have the right to go on that portion of the flagpole to get in there and maintain the public sewer line and the public manhole. From that manhole, a private sewer line runs farther south to provide sewer service to the Anderson property, and also not in the flagpole, but on the property just to the east, as I understand it, is a private water line that provides water to the Anderson house. So moving on to page 8, it about halfway down has the number 11, prior applications, and this is where all these maps come from. There's enough going on that it seemed worthy to have a step-by-step so you can see how these 3 partitions and 2 easements and 1 maintenance agreement came into play and where they apply. So the middle of page 8, number 11, it talks about there being some prior actions. One of them is a November 92 20-foot wide easement, a June 93 partition, a December 93 52.5-foot wide easement to the city, a June 94 road maintenance agreement, a July 95 partition plat, let's see, that was number 5, and then the 6th item was the subject property. Out of all these things, the subject property was only the subject of one land use action by the city. It had other things applying to it, easements and agreements and things, but only one land use action, and that was a partition in 1975. So on page 9, there's two maps. The one at the top shows tax lot 1600 to the left, 1700 to the right, the way they were back in the early 90s. And then in 1992, this 20-foot wide by 258-foot long easement shown with red diagonal lines was placed on the eastern 20 feet of tax lot 1600. All on 1600. Tax lot 1700 to the right was unaffected. So the owner of 1600 said, I'm going to grant a 20-foot wide easement to the owner of 1700, so 1700 can go on the 20-foot wide easement and get out to Sheridan Road. And you would wonder, why would that be needed when 1700 has, I don't know, 150 or 200 feet of frontage on Sheridan Road? Well, the people who did the easement were relatives of the people in 1700, and they had a plan. So, the bottom of page 8, or excuse me, 9, that shows the next step in their plan. And that is the 1993 partition where tax lot 1700 was partitioned, split up into 3 lots. And that was shown in red, and then that's all on 1700. To the left side is still 1600 with a 20-foot wide easement. Going on to page 10 then, is the map shows in yellow, the 1993 52.5-foot wide easement where the owners of 1700 and 1800 got together and they said, okay, we're going to grant to the city a 52.5-foot wide easement for access and public utilities, sewer, water lines, and things like that. So the thing to note here is the 1700 that by 1993 was actually 3 lots. That yellow easement covers 15 feet on the west side of 1700 and 1702. And then it covers the 20 feet that was the 1992 easement. And then it goes 17.5 more feet to fill out the 52.5-foot width. So, if that's not complicated enough, we're moving on to yet another one. Page 11. And page 11 is where the first of the 1995 partitions occurs. I don't want you to have to be flipping pages too much, but on page 10, you notice tax lot 1700. It started out as a bigger lot, and then through the 93 partition, which created 3 lots, the tax lot number got reduced and covered only one of those 3 lots. Well, that tax lot 1700 in 1995 got split again into 1700 and 1703, and so that's what page 11 is showing. The 52.5-foot wide easement in yellow is still there. The 20-foot wide 1992 easement is still there, but we just have one extra lot. Finally, on page 12, we're not dealing with tax lot 7, the original 1700, and it's 4 lots now. We're over on the left left side for the 1600 has been sitting there for a few years with not much going on, but in mid-75, or 95, excuse me, the tax lot 1600 was partitioned into what it is now, a flag lot with a 37.5-foot wide flagpole, and then where the Flemings currently live at tax lot 1600. So on this one, at the bottom of the yellow, it shows the 15 feet of the yellow easement. It's on the west 15 feet of 1700, 1703, and 1702. And then it shows in the middle the 20-foot wide red diagonal lines. That's the 20-foot easement that was the first thing done back in 92. And then the western 17.5 feet make up the rest of the flagpole width. So when you see this, and you see where the Fleming tax lot 1600 is now, it is 17.5 feet away from the 20-foot wide easement. One of the contentions is that the Flemings have direct access onto that 20-foot wide easement. But from my reading and mapping things out, it appears the Fleming property, 1600, is 17.5 feet away. So to get over to the easement, well, they're gonna have to go up to Sheridan Road, walk over, and then come down south into the 20-foot wide easement. If they are on their property and try to go straight east, oops, they have to go on somebody else's property for 17.5 feet before they get to the 20-foot wide easement. The Flemings in their appeal letter, which is in your packet and you've had a chance to read, they indicate that they have contacted a title company and have asked that title company to advise the Flemings as to what's going on here. Because the Flemings thought that they had that 20-foot easement was right there on their east property line, and all they had to do was step off their property onto the 20-foot easement. Not until the Planning Commission hearing were they aware that anybody thought anything different than that. And unfortunately, the thought that was handed out in a map at the Planning Commission hearing was that Fleming property is 17.5 feet away. So they'd have to, in effect, trespass on 17.5 feet to get over to the 20-foot easement to be able to get out on Sheridan Road. But they have like 160 feet of frontage on Sheridan Road as is. So it's, as a functional matter, not clear why they would need the 20-foot easement. But anyway, so that's the series of maps. Sorry to take so long on that, but step by step, you can see how actions by private property owners, not by the city, resulted in these things. The partitions certainly were granted by the city, but they were proposed by the property owners, and the city approved what the property owners proposed. So I'm moving on now, and page 14, and sorry to be so step-by-step with this. I know you've had this for several days and you've had a chance to look through it and get familiar with it, but page 14 shows the flag lot with the basic layout of the park. The main driveway comes in from Sheridan Road from the north, and then in the flag portion of the property, there's a east-west private drive that has mobile homes or manufactured homes to the north and south of it. And then a little farther south, we've got another east-west private drive with manufactured homes to the north and south. And then at the very south, where the railroad track is, there's a stormwater detention basin and a child play area. So, material related to the Fleming appeal letter. The first comment was just a reiteration of one that they had made at the planning commission about the homeowners association and would there be a person on site to manage. And the applicant, back at the planning commission hearing, responded to that. And that response is here. The board is consisting of owners, will be formed to manage and administer the bylaws and the conditions, covenants, and restrictions. At this time, it is unknown whether there will be an on-site manager or not. Concern 2, again, it's a reiteration of a concern that was at the planning commission, and that is about Fleming's not wanting the city to approve any new large developments until something can be done with the condition of Sheridan Road. The finding at that time, the planning commission, was that the applicant understood the city has plans to improve the condition of Sheridan Road, and then the city comment in addition to that was that the city has set aside federal ARPA funds to improve Sheridan Road and is estimating the possible cost of the project. Moving on to their third of 4 concerns, it was about no planning commission minutes on the city's website. It doesn't say the minutes of which meeting, but presumably it was the meeting of the planning commission in early August, where the planning commission took up the appeal of the original decision. And the response to that is the planning commission meetings, the same as with your city council meetings, are not posted on the city's website until the body has a chance to review them and approve them. So with the planning commission hearing on August 8th, they won't meet again until September 12th, this coming Monday. So they haven't had a chance to review the minutes prepared by city staff and approve them as reflecting, what happened at the meeting. The 4th item is that the, the 4th item addresses the 2-page November 23, 1992 easement. That's the 20-foot wide first easement, and the map prepared by the city staff, which showed that easement being 17.5 feet away from the Fleming property. And this is where the Fleming letter says they've engaged or asked the title company, and I don't know what the title company might have said. Tonight, hopefully, we'll find out from the testimony. All of page 16 is about that, and so I'm not going to say anything more about that. And moving up several pages now to page 18, where the Anderson appeal letter is addressed. The information I'm passing over is a discussion mainly just to establish factual basis as to what the partition plat 9575 did and what the partition plat 9549 did. So the Anderson's appeal letter, that material starting on page 18, the first concern, and I might note that from your reading of the Anderson's letter, they didn't have numbers or letters for their specific concerns, so to try to provide some organization for the council to be able to take it one at a time, so to speak, I've broken these down into 20 concerns, and I apologize to the Andersons if I've not accurately been able to pick out exactly which concerns or what is a concern and what is a backup statement and so forth. But the first concern I picked out was in the first paragraph that they are opposed to the way the development code is being interpreted, the manufactured home park being favored over the existing property owners, and the intent of the initial development is being is being overlooked. So it's characterized here as favor, but in the staff report, or in the original decision, and in the planning commission decision, the findings are what leads staff to conclude what it concludes. It's not because we're favoring the manufactured home park, or that applicant, or the property owners. It's that we're looking at the standards in the development code and the statewide standards, and concluding whether or not the proposed park meets those standards. As to the intent of the initial development being overlooked, and then at the very bottom of page 18, the Anderson letter says we have attempted to show the intent of the original developer and the city following the timeline and documents. So, in the response, basically coming down to a land use application and a decision by the city in 2022 is not something that the city now are committed to based on what happened approximately 30 years ago. And based on the maps that we went over, the 2 easements, the road maintenance agreement, the 3 partitions, they did what they did, but what was their intent really? It appears that their intent, and there's reference in the material, to the final land use action would need a public street. Well, the only property left for a final action was the subject property here, tax lot 1601. It had a skinny flagpole with a wider easement. So the point is, in the 93 partition, or the first 95 partition, or the second 95 partition, at any time, those partition applications could have proposed dedicating land for a public right-of-way. None of those partition applications proposed that, so none of them were approved with a requirement to dedicate land for a 52.5 foot wide public right-of-way where a public street could be built. Today, what we have is a 20-foot wide easement, and that's just a grant of a right for access. The land underneath is still private. We have a 52.5 foot wide easement, which was a grant to the city for access, but underneath, the land is still privately owned. And that 52.5 foot wide easement covers 15 feet of the Anderson 2 lots and the lot north of that we're Cedar ownership now. And so if you're going to have a public street, it has to be public right-of-ways. It cannot be private ownership. So the intent over all these years with easements and maintenance agreements and partitions, nobody ever said, I'd be glad to dedicate my land to the public for a public right-of-way, a public street to serve the properties. So it's not clear what the intent really was. It might be that the intent was, and this is in the staff report, so I apologize for repeating what you've already read, but it could be said that the intent was to have some easements granted, but then when it came time for the last development application on tax lot 1601, the subject property for the park, well, the city would build the street. And that street would benefit just a few properties. Okay, typically when development occurs and it generates trips, that is what justifies the city requiring the property owner to dedicate land and build a public street to take care of the impact created by the development. intent years ago, but as the owners of 1700 and the various lots there, and 1600, with its two ultimate lots, once they sold and went away, well, what was the intent? They never wrote it down, it wasn't in any of the applications, and you might say that they could have, even if they didn't dedicate any of their land for a public right-of-way, they could have, as they sold their properties, put deed restrictions, covenants, and conditions on it to require future owners to follow up with whatever the intent was back in the 1990s. But as they sold their properties, they didn't do that either.
According to the requirements of the mobile home park, they can have a private drive as access. But does an easement equate to a private drive?
In this case, the 10K Doors Company owns the land that is the subject property, so they own the flagpole. And they have rights as the owner to use that flagpole, and if they develop their property as a manufactured home park, all those people get to use the flagpole to get out to Sheridan Road. The complicating factor, so to speak, for this is 20 feet, the eastern 20 feet of the flagpole is an easement granted to the original owner of 1700, and by that, the owners of all the 1700 tax lot numbers. So the two lots owned by the Andersons, they have the right to go out on the 20 feet and get to Sheridan Road. The Mercier property with frontage on Sheridan Road has the right to go out to their west, get on this 20-foot easement and go to Sheridan Road, but they already have a driveway directly onto Sheridan Road. So,
It's not needed.
yeah, it's one of those things where the statewide standards allow a private drive to serve a manufactured home park, and for some parks, it could be 200-300 units. And this is only 18 units. So, I am not going to address every single comment. I will allow, or the comments can take their time to do more of that. I think with this admittedly overarching explanation of what's going on here, when we do get into more details, then we can get to specific pages in the staff report. And I think, just taking a quick look through, there's a couple more things I need to mention. Just need to find what page they're on. Okay, on page 26 of 226, there's a comment, a concern about the mailboxes. And the mailboxes are shown on the site plan as a conceptual location. Basically, as you drive into the park on the private drive, on your right, there's a space for the mailboxes, and that's where the mail truck would pull up, put the mail in the box, and then people would come to the box and get their mail. That spot isn't set in stone because the postmaster of the Sheridan Post Office gets to pick what's going on with the mail. If he or she wants to allow a mailbox at every single space, then that's what the Postal Service can allow. On the other hand, like they've been doing for 20 or 30 years now, for a lot of new developments, all the mailboxes are somewhere near the entry, and the mail gets deposited there, and then all of the residents go to the mailboxes. Luckily, on the very next page, 29, it raises the concern about a condition of approval number 41, and that is a condition that required a site exterior 6-foot-high fence around the perimeter of the manufactured home park. And it did recognize that the two Anderson properties would need a driveway from each property into the flagpole, and so the condition allowed that the 6-foot-high fence would have a space for each driveway to be able to get in and out. And so the concern is that the Andersons don't want any fence on the west property lines of their two tax lots, 1703 and 1702. And so basically staff is okay with that. In the middle of page 26 and 29, it has a couple of options. If the city council is not okay with having no fence at all, then a fence that is 30 inches high could be put up with spaces for the two driveways. And that comes from the vision clearance triangle, maximum height. And then another one would be fences up to 42 inches, which is the maximum height for a fence in the front yard. So we have three options. No fence at all, which is what the Andersons are asking for, or a fence 30 inches high, or a fence 42 inches high. And staff is okay with whichever you choose to do. The basic issue is that the Andersons want unlimited access from anywhere on their two lots, be able to just get over there, walk over, and be on the 20-foot wide easement.
And I think that Councilman Booth, do you have questions there?
No, I'm still listening to him. I don't know if that's not, I'm sorry, just reading papers.
So I'm up to page 35, which is at the bottom, the staff recommendation. Staff recommends the city council consider the staff report and its attachments, the testimony from the applicant, the appellant, and others who testify, and pass a motion to affirm the August 8, 2022 Planning Commission order affirming the July 7, 2022 administrative decision as revised by the findings in the staff report and as revised by the resolution of the fence issue raised in the Anderson letter. So that is it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
I haven't dealt with anything like this in a little confused. Going back through history, where the original 20-foot easement came out of tax lot 1600.
Yes.
And all that's saying is, you can use this property to drive on, or whatever use for that property can be, everyone can use it, is that correct?
Yes, it's an easement granted by the owner of 1600 to the owner of 1700, allowing the owner of 1700 to come onto that 20-foot wide strip and get out to Sheridan Road.
Okay, and then following that,
Can I just, sorry, just to clarify Jim's answer on that too, it is specifically in the easement for automobile driveway purposes, so not just unlimited access.
following that, there was a 15-foot easement granted to the east along this 20-foot easement. Is that, did I get that wrong, or is that correct?
No, that is correct. The map on page 10 shows the 52.5-foot wide easement that, well, let me back up, even though it's in the staff report, tax lot 1600 was owned by Florian and Rosemarie Bonney. Their adult children, Gary and Donna, owned 1700. So because they were relatives, they, you know, had whatever plan they had and went step by step to carry out, at least until they sold their properties, whatever intent and plan they had. So, the elder Bonnies and the younger Bonnies got together and said, yeah, on the eastern part of tax lot 1600, and then the younger Bonnies said, yeah, on the western 15 feet of our property, we together will grant a 52.5-foot wide easement to the city for public access and sewer and water lines.
I
So,
think that's my confusion then. I understand them, getting a 15-foot easement, it's on their property. But the other 17.5-foot easement would be on the, what is now the Fleming property, tax lot 1600. Is that correct?
yes,
But you,
yeah, that's,
as I understood two things, I'm not trying to interrupt you at all, but, so we've got 52.5 feet, that I understand. The two things I don't understand is, A, and as you mentioned, the reason it's not, you can't put a street there is this property underneath is owned by people, they're just giving an easement to let traffic go on it. The 17.5-foot easement is on the tax lot 1600, the Fleming property, yet you said he can't go across that easement to get on the original 20-foot easement without trespassing. Is that what you said? Did I get that?
that's what it appears to me.
The
And
clarification that I think is being missed here, the 17.5 feet is not on tax lot 1600. The 17.5 feet is on tax lot 1601 as part of
Okay, I'm
the
sorry, yeah.
7.5 foot.
Based on the new, okay, so there's the catch then. Okay, that's what I was getting up to, is how did, tax lot 1601 become the owner of the entire 52.5-foot easement? I guess that's what I really don't understand.
well, the owner is 1601, only owns 1601, and then that means this, their portion of the 52.5-foot wide easement only covers 37.5 feet of 1601. The eastern 15 feet of the 52.5-foot wide easement is on what originally was tax lot 1700, the younger Bonnies, and now it's owned by, well, 4 lots owned by 3 different owners, but the 3 properties that have the 15 feet of easement on them are 1700, 1703, and 1702.
So, actually, the 17 does encumber 16. Because it goes over here, I mean, it supplies both. This is the 17.5 that actually goes across 1600 to 1601. Is that right, that the 17.5 that goes across 1600 supplies entry to 1601? And you said that was for public use? The city?
Yes, the 52.5-foot wide easement was, in general terms, granted to the city for access and sewer and water lines,
Public access?
with the idea, apparently, that that 52.5 feet someday would be a public right-of-way, probably built by the city at taxpayers' expense. And unfortunately, the last step or two that could have resulted in a public street, they weren't taken. Because, for example, the last partition where tax lot 1600 was split into 1600 and 1601, well, gosh, they could have dedicated their land to the public for a public right-of-way, but they didn't do that. They retained ownership underneath with the easement, so to speak, over the top, granting access and granted to the city for access and sewer and water lines. And in fact, as stated in the staff report, all these actions left it up to the city to decide if there was going to be a public street sometime. And the city has never decided that it wanted a public street there, and even today is not contemplating a public street. And they could have, when they sold the property, they could have put deed restrictions, covenants, and conditions and things on that would have committed any future owner, whoever bought the property, to have to put in a public street, for example, or to have to dedicate right-of-way for a public street. But the Bonnies, the older and younger Bonnies, didn't do that either.
So, once again, so the 17.5 is to the city of Sheridan for public access.
And the 20 feet and 15 feet.
So, public access, does that not mean the public can travel on that?
I don't know. I am aware that at a Oregon Bar training session on easements, the material was 109 pages. So I don't have any intent on trying to explain the legalities of an easement, given whatever the specific
Well, we're
language
talking
is.
also intent from the Bonnie to the Bonnie, and public access is when you say that Flemings are landlocked, if it's public access to the city, that would be public access for anybody to drive up that, let's just say the 17.5, because that's the part in question, that they could go up to 17, because it's public access that the city has. Is that correct?
I don't know if it's correct or not. It could be, but I just always talk about these easements and plats and things. It tends to get us away from the standard, the statewide standard for access to a manufactured home park is a private driveway, 30 feet wide for the first 100 feet into the property, and then it can narrow down to 20 feet. And if you're doing a manufactured home park with 200 units or 300 units, if you have a 30-foot wide driveway that narrows down to 20, you're good. You meet the state standard.
Okay,
And
so
all
we're
this
going back to the
talk
intent.
about 50 feet, it's not needed.
But what was the statute back in the 1990s? Was it
I'm
the
gonna
same?
interrupt, that's not relevant.
Okay.
What we are determining today is whether the applicable standards as they are today are met for the approval of the
So,
application. for
then I
the-
guess my question is public access defined as ingress and egress? If the city has public access, that means for ingress and egress for the public versus the 20-foot that was originated, then the 15 that I understand was meant for the property owners on the east side, because 20 and 15 is 35. And then the other 17 that is the city's easement for public would, and I'm just going here once again to your word intent, what was the intent? Was, I mean, like, I would think the intent would be to gain access to the mother and father to get to the back of that property without being stifled to a 20-foot easement. If they were alive at that time, and I'm not sure exactly when they did
Now,
that.
given that the elder Bonnies owned all of 1600, and when they split it into 1600 and 1601, they still owned all of it. So they could chop around anywhere on their property that they wanted to, and they didn't need the easements. It was the older Bonnies and the younger Bonnies that had some idea that somehow involved these easements doubling over on each other, a 20-foot easement and then a 52.5-foot easement. And they never stayed around to effectuate whatever their intent was. And so we're left wondering what it was. We've got some evidence, but given that they apparently miscalculated, they assumed that the last development would be on 1601, And it would probably be a partition or a subdivision, which they thought would need a public right-of-way. Well, oops, that's not what the proposal is. It's a manufactured home park. Or it could have been an apartment project. And you get into apartment projects and manufactured home parks through a private drive. You don't need a 50-foot wide right-of-way with a public street built apparently by the city at taxpayer expense.
But, yeah, I'm more concerned just with the public access to the 17.5. That's the point I keep going back to, because that's the one that I had a question with. Public access is, public access, so not to deny it, but to say that you have the right to use that, along with the 20-foot easement that's already in place before you go to the east side of the 20-foot easement.
So apparently, using that line of thought, that could lead to the manufactured home park being built. Their 30-foot wide driveway coming in, narrowing down to 20 feet. And then because of this leftover 52.5-foot wide easement, anybody from the public can come in along Sheridan Road and walk on the western 15 feet of the Mercier property, the western 15 feet of Anderson's tax lot 1703, and the western 15 feet of the Anderson 1702. And they can walk on any of the 37.5-foot wide flagpole.
For public access, that's
So it might be that if this park is built, the owner of it will have people, if they know, then people can just, anytime they want, walk off Sheridan Road and come in 258 feet on the easement. I would imagine that the city might want to relinquish its rights to that 52.5-foot wide easement, be done with it.
Or they could possibly do something with the adjoining property owner to the west.
But none of this is going to the criteria that apply to approving or not
Well, it
approving.
was the intent, it was the 20-foot, fencing on two sides, you got 15 on one side, 17 on the other side. It's just trying to take that wall down, if you know what I'm saying.
And the city isn't bound by any undefined intent from 30 years ago. All these actions, no one can say that due to these things, the city today has to approve a public street. And the mechanics of that is if the city were to take that action and say, okay, we're going to force a public street in here, it's going to be 52.5 feet wide, the applicant, the owner, we're going to have to force them to dedicate 37.5 feet to the public for a right-of-way. We're going to have to force the Merciers to dedicate 15 feet of their property to the public for a right-of-way, and then 15 feet of each of the Anderson properties.
Well, actually, I wasn't even, just keep kind of getting off where I'm going to, which is the easement.
Lucy, I think we've exceeded our time limit for giving them a staff report. Maybe Jim could come back later and we could allow the proponents and opponents to present their.
There'll be an opportunity for more questions.
Yes, I think we all are looking forward to that too. But we're not done, it's just that if we can kind of move this along a little bit for the,
Just wanted that for
Yeah.
clarification.
yes. Proponents for the case?
Proponents?
Yes.
The online.
Did you say opponent or applicant?
Proponents.
Which is the applicant.
Yeah, the applicant.
Yeah, the sound's very difficult tonight, so, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is Hal Keever with Atwell LLC, and we represent the owner for the applicant. And I just want to say that since it's first and foremost on everyone's mind, we believe that the public access doesn't mean public right-of-way, otherwise it would have said that. It means access for public utilities and things of that forth. And I want to address a little bit and say that we believe that Jim has done a very good job in analyzing this. We believe that the planning commission's decision was accurate and true, and we agree with the staff report, and we'd like to move forward.
Is there any other proponents? If none, we'll go on to questions of the proponents. Does anyone have any questions of what this just said?
Are there any questions about the application that you feel like the applicant can answer? They're based on the question that. Okay.
So now we'll take the opponent's case. If there's anyone that would like to speak?
Yes, we have Judy Anderson.
Judy?
And she is speaking on behalf of the entire group. So Judy and I have come to the conclusion that she can have, and with Tyler, she can have 20 minutes. Says she needs 17.
I'm probably gonna take the 20 after all of that. So.
I won.
Okay, I was gonna start with something else, but I'm gonna go to my, make sure.
Judy, we have to, for the audio recording, you have to say your name and your address.
I'm Judy Anderson, 620 Southeast Sheridan Road in Sheridan. And I don't know how well everybody can see this, but since we were just on this topic, I kind of tried to show the three partitions. The original partition, 9323, made these three lots. Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 3. And then the 1995 partition made this big lot, this one right here, it made this big lot into two lots, Lot 1 and 2. So this is an Anderson property, and this is an Anderson property. And then the last partition did partition this whole thing, which was 1600, into 1600 and 1601. And this shows the 20-foot driveway, reciprocal driveway easement is all that this is. And then there's the additional 17 and a half on this side. And I tried to show where they want to come in at 30 feet and then start narrowing it down to 20 feet. And right in front of our driveway, where I know staff thought I should be able to turn around, but I can't. I need to back out onto this road to leave to go out to Sheridan Road. And it wasn't mentioned by Jim about this 10 by 80, 58-foot stretch that the city wants to relinquish of their easement. If you notice, the last page of the little packet that I handed out shows that the mobile home park would be able to get their last mobile home in right here if the city would give up just this little portion right here. And I mean, that directly affects us right there. So I wanted to point that out before I started on what I had to say. And I gave, basically what I gave out, everybody has in their packet. But I just wanted to try to make it easier as I went through, because I'm gonna go through the same map that Jim did.
How I'm emailing you Judy's picture.
Okay. So, and the first thing we want people to know is that we do support affordable housing in Sheridan. That's not what this is about. And so this map packet that I gave you, the top map shows the lot 1600 and 1700 with the 20-foot reciprocal easement as Jim explained. And that's specifically for driveway purposes. And it was done because both lots, 1600 and 1700, wanted access to their land from that strip, from that little strip. And as Jim said, Florian and Eleanor owned tax lot 37, and Gary and Donna owned tax lot 1700. And then on the bottom map, it shows that first partition that's in orange up there, creating parcels 1, 2, and 3 from tax lot 1700. And it was originally called case 92-4. Lot 1 at that time had access to Sheridan Road, and lots 2 and 3 had access to the reciprocal 20-foot easement, as did tax lot 1600. And the declaration, because I think the part that's missing, you really have to read the declarations that are on the partition plats, and you have to read the easements, the specific easements giving the 52.5 feet to the city, because it does talk about roadway, public roadway, public access, it talks about all of those things. So I don't think you can just gloss over all of the stuff that's in those documents. And the declaration on that first case, it says, in part, and do hereby provide roadway access to a joint use strip of land 20 feet in width, as indicated. Again, joint use between 1600 and the new partitions. And then if you go to page 10, then the next map shows the 52.5-foot wide easement to the city of Sheridan for public access, ingress and egress, construction of public roadways, perpetual rights for utilities, and for the city to hold said public access and utilities unto city successors and assigns forever. Note, this overlapped the previous reciprocal easement. This easement would benefit all adjacent parcels now and in the future, so that would mean 1600 and what if there's 1601, all of them. There are a couple errors on that one. It shows the middle portion as 25 feet, and it's not, it should be 20, and it also says on there that we were the owners of tax lot 1703, and that wasn't even developed at this time, and we bought that additional property closer to 2013. So then if you go to map 11, it shows the partition 5949, which is the one in white up there, creating parcels 1 and 2 from what was then parcel 3. And the declaration states in part, and do hereby provide roadway access to said parcels on a joint use strip of land 52.5 feet in width as indicated. Again, joint use by 1600 and any new partitions is declared. In addition, I would like to point to the approval condition for these parcels, especially on page 67 of the document that I gave you. It's on 67 of your packet, and it's in what I gave you, where it says each parcel will have a street frontage at 80 feet. And remember, we are talking about these two parcels right here, 1 and 2. This landlocked essentially parcel 2. It says each parcel will have a street frontage of at least 80 feet on either an existing public street or an identified future public street. That's the city document with the conditions of approval for that petition. And page 64 and 66 of that same document name conditions of approval referencing prior agreements between the city and the developer for street improvements that were from case 92-4, which that case 92-4 is essentially, according to staff, it is P93-23. That's the original document that when things were starting to get partitioned. So when I asked for those documents, they're missing. So the only thing we have to go by of what that document said is these subsequent partitions that said multiple times they talk about the identified future public street, and that parcel number 2 has to be on a public street. So I think the intent was clear and beyond intent, it was action by the city. They required it. They put it in the requirements. On page 12, the map shows the partition, the last partition, 9575, creating parcels 1 and 2 from lot 1600. And it shows existing access and utility easement within the flagpole. Again, this is showing the flagpole is encumbered with a joint use easement for utilities and access to all adjacent parcels. And a reference to a couple ideas or examples of what was done to accommodate the future partitioning. In addition to the 52.5-foot city easement, we, the Andersons, participated in the initial development of the utilities. Our home was the first to be developed. We were starting the home before, partitioning and everything was really even done. At our own expense, we participated in installing utilities beyond the capacity of what would be required for one house. We set our meter at the request of the city to accommodate the future street. In addition, our house was placed slightly to the north to accommodate an RV, so that we could fit that RV between the south side of our house and our south property line, in order that we can back in and back out and use that complete 37.5 feet of public ingress and egress that's owned by the city. And today, we are using that, and we don't want the city to give it away. We did these things in expectation of the known future public street and facility improvements related to partitioning case 9323. While the city documents are missing that spell the conditions of approval for that partition, the documents we do have, which are page 64 to 71 of what I gave you, for the 95 partitions, they both make multiple references to an agreement with the city of Sheridan for certain street and facility improvements. On page 67, it essentially says, tax lot 2 of partition 9549 will have a street frontage of at least 80 feet on either an existing street or an identified future public street. We are asking the city to uphold the requirements for a public street as referenced in the later partitions. We're beyond intent. I think we know what was required, and I don't know. Clearly, the documents also show that the city's public easement was to benefit all adjacent parcels, and that a condition of approval was for a public street. Therefore, the city should hold said public access and utility easements onto the city, successors, and assigns forever, as stated in the city easement, and retain all of its easements. And although the mobile home park development is listed as needed housing, it shouldn't be taken to mean that it's at the expense of the residents who have lived and cared for their parcels for 30 years, or by releasing public use access to the livability and financial detriment of adjacent parcel owners, or at the expense of the city's own development code and prior conditions of approval. It's our opinion the codes and conditions are being overlooked, not met, or unable to be met. The Sheridan Development Code, for example, but backing up again to the Oregon Mobile Dwelling Park Specialty Code that Jim had referred to, I'm going to just call it the Specialty Code. It allows cities to set their own criteria for certain conditions of approval for mobile home parks, but the criteria may not be greater or less than the requirements for single-family uses in the same zone. So the SDCs for mobile home parks that Sheridan has adopted as part of their approval criteria, Y of that approval criteria says the perimeter of the manufactured home park shall be fenced with at least a 6 foot high, 100% site obscuring fence. This can't be achieved. This flagpole is way beyond private. Private would mean for the park only, for just them to use. That's not the situation we have. The flagpole is already encumbered with easements on both sides. The whole thing is encumbered. You really wouldn't be able to fence any of it. Otherwise, you'd be taking away the public access for example, Fleming's and the frontage house in front, Mercier. She has access to that also. Staff has stated on page 19 of your packet, not what I gave you, but 19 of the packet, says that the Sheridan Development Code does not require a park to be accessed by a public street or a private street to public standards. Well, item AC of the Sheridan's approval criteria says different. The size and construction of the private park, street, curbs, and sidewalks Where they connect to the public way for the first 100 feet shall comply with the city public works construction standards for public streets. Sheridan could have decided not to make these additional conditions. They could have just gone on with a specialty code, but they didn't. They made these codes, so it seems like the applicant would need to meet the SDC criteria for mobile home parks. We believe by not requiring a public street, the city is allowing the criteria to be less for a mobile home park. Staff also say it's common for mobile home parks to be accessed by a private drive, possibly, but our uncommon situation is the flagpole is beyond private. The park estimates 180 trips per day. The developer is aware that they could ask for a variance of the street and not, and the city could grant that so that it wouldn't have to be as wide as a regular street. Also from the Sheridan Development Code, it talks about the standards for lots and parcels. Flag lots over 200 feet need to meet the private street code standards. Private street code standards say private streets are not allowed in this section of Sheridan. That's the current code. But in a prior response from the staff, the city said that we needed to go by the older code for the development. The previously mentioned documents seem to spell out how the prior codes were interpreted by the city when they required a public street for the future parcels. Again, regardless of the type of development, this is a flag lot, and we don't change that by calling it a private park drive. We are asking for the referenced known public street to be required. If the city is not willing to hold up their original requirement of these partitions and are willing to go against the development code, we ask that at a minimum, the entire 37.5 feet of the easement for public access, roadway use, and utilities for all adjacent parcels is returned. If a public street is required and recognized, it will eliminate the unachievable obstacle of a 100% site-secured fence along that flagpole, which I believe is a safety issue among other things. The city could require the developer to modify their site plan in order to be contained within, inside of the area that doesn't include the public access easement area. And if the city goes back on their requirement for a public street, the road maintenance agreement needs to be required to be modified. Because currently, basically, we're, responsible for the road. And if one other parcel is using it, it's split evenly between the parcels. So the developer themselves said they would be responsible for half, and we would be responsible for half. So I think the city would need to require that be modified. This is a detailed, complicated matter. If a resolution is not possible, we request at least a continuance to be granted in order that all stakeholders might sit together with possibly an impartial party to work through the discrepancies. We welcome the chance to have productive conversations with all the affected parties. To date, we don't feel our concerns have been seriously considered. We have many more concerns than the time allows to address today. Our last request is that you please consider the current state of Sheridan Road before adding yet another 180 plus vehicles per day to it. Thank you. Okay. And I think, we already talked about, I talked about pretty much what I needed to on the map. This is obviously a huge concern. This area that, wasn't even highlighted tonight in staff discussion, but they want to give this away, and as you can see, so that they can.
You can't get these things.
Then it can fit, their required storage unit, because they're required to have storage unit right there. Okay, that's it. Any questions?
That was really informative.
I believe that storage unit situation was discussed in the packet, and that they could move that unit somewhere else.
That'd be great if the city doesn't have to give away their, the easement, that we're using, and then the other things would be met.
On that point, I might note in the staff report, it comments that the developer would have a couple of options. Either move the 10 by 6 60 square foot storage building somewhere else on the site, or they could put a smaller manufactured home on that space 5, and then they have space, they have room for the storage structure. So it's not a matter of having to drop a space, it's a matter of working with the space that's there, and either the city could relinquish part of it, the 10-foot by 58-foot long easement area, which the city attorney several weeks ago said the city has the ability to do, relinquish part of its easement. And I might comment that the yellow up there, I can understand that it's a big space to highlight where that is, but the 10 by 58 foot space is significantly smaller than that. That gives a very inaccurate visual representation
I'm
of
sorry,
how big the 10 by 58 space is.
It probably is does probably represent 17 feet, because I think I just followed the 17 feet along, so I didn't think right about that.
But if the city doesn't want to follow through and relinquish 580 square feet of an easement, then the applicant could have a smaller manufactured home, and that would provide space for the 6 by 10 storage structure.
May I add just a couple of notes? One is, City of Sheridan does not have a cost for appeals. There typically is in cities. The city has spent quite a bit of money at this point for the legal and as well as for Jim's time to research this. I just want to point that out as we consider the options, one of the options being to sit down together to be heard. That option will incur additional costs for the taxpayers of Sheridan. This particular case, land use cases, are paid mostly out of the general fund.
My time is valuable too, and I've spent an enormous amount of time on this. I do want you to know
Sure,
that.
I can
yes.
absolutely see
Yes,
that.
3 vacations canceled.
See that.
Are there any other questions at this time?
Yeah,
I've
you
got the,
still have a minute and a half.
I've got the code pulled up in front of me. Which specific code are you saying are using the old?
Well, staff was told that, because this was a flag lot and it was partitioned back when, then if they, whatever they allowed back then is what we would allow now, which confused me, but that's what we did, and then that's what prompted me to ask for the old applications, which I was happy I did, and then once I got the 2 applications that I did get, I said, great, where's this 92-3 document, because that's where it's at, everything is right there, after months of looking, and then, oh, we don't have that one last document, so.
Cities are not required to keep land use documents forever, but there also was a very tragic incident that happened at some point where there was a big flood. Where a lot of this was in the flood, took away a lot of the city's.
I understand, I mean, and it's not anybody's fault, but I think the 2 documents that we do have make it pretty clear what was required of the initial one.
I don't know where we are in the land use requirement for the time. Are we at the 120 days, or?
We
How
are
does that
currently
play into
in a 30-day extension to September 15, I believe.
And the next city council meeting is September 19th. I am happy to sit down with Judy and the Affirming if you would like me to try to come up with a solution to the problem.
And would it help at all if, I don't know, I hope it's okay to say this, at the time when I did meet the parents, and the oldest son was the state manager, and I could find him, then the intent of this whole partitioning, would that make a difference?
That would not be helpful because we have 28 criteria. If the 28 criteria are met, the original intent of the property owners cannot override the city's requirement to approve the manufactured home park based on its criteria.
can we use the criteria that she quoted from this handout here?
We are all talking about the same thing criteria.
As, I didn't know they knew about this one until
Do
tonight. I
land
just got
use,
this
do
tonight.
land use, requirements go away at when you partition? If I partition something and then I don't really like it, I can't really afford to put in the street, if I just wait 30 years, does it go away? I don't know the answer to that question. Do I not have to do that anymore?
Well, it depends on what kind of a requirement was in the original decision. It appears that none of these decisions for these several partitions ever required any of the applicants to dedicate land to the public for a public right-of-way, nor did they require the applicants to improve, build a street. And so with no requirement, well, there's no requirement. It's lots are created, and apparently the intent was to try to work easements onto the properties that would allow people to get out to Sheridan Road.
I'm not looking at what intent anymore, I'm looking at action by the city. So I'm not talking about intent.
Things do expire.
And what is the
It
expiration on that then?
depends, the land use.
Well,
Once the appeal period for a land use decision has passed, that is locked in. So if your argument is that one of those 1993 or 1995 partition actions required the development of a public street on that strip, and that was not met, you had to go back to 1995 to make that. That is not currently enforceable.
Because my lot, number 2, says I have to have a public street to use it, that's what it says.
So I think that, well, we can be here all night, okay? So I really think, we have a big agenda
I
still
know
in
you
front
do.
of us too.
I
So
know.
I don't wanna cut anybody off, but Ms. Anderson has given several good points, and she's given some solutions for moving forward, proposed solutions that she's drafted. The city planner has drafted some solutions, or proposed some solutions for moving forward, and I think I don't know, we've run out of cards, so I don't know where we are on the white little comic card anymore, but I imagine we're getting to the point where people should start to, let's see, we're
I
at
think it's probably other comments or questions.
number 9.
What we're at,
Okay, are there other comments or questions? But I think what I'm getting to is I think we should start to try to go forward towards wrapping up for tonight.
I'd like to suggest that the council agree to perhaps meeting again, bringing up the case Mrs. Anderson has brought to us, along with the specific criteria that we can consider, and kind of come with enough information that we as a council can review and make a decision. Because I don't know about the rest of the council. There's a lot here, and I wouldn't want to make a decision tonight because I don't feel I would do justice to either one.
If the city does not make a decision in the next 9 days, the applicant has the right to sue us in circuit court to approve without petition their application. That is what the 120 day, that's now a 150 day because they have to voluntarily give us 30 additional days. So,
Well, council only got this on last week.
State law does not.
I know that, but I'm just saying, we are being asked to make a decision on this, and I think we want to make the right decision, and I haven't had enough time, or I haven't heard enough testimony for me to make a decision personally. So can we plan a meeting before the deadline?
Tyler and I have time, he's coming in on this Thursday. Is that correct? So we have time this Thursday for Tyler and I to work on this with Jim, who's also here on Thursday. And maybe at that time, we could sit down with Judy.
This Thursday?
She has time on Thursday morning, sometime between 9 and 12. And perhaps that's a good starting place for all of us. And then we could have a special council meeting on either the 13th or the 14th, because I could generate a report from that.
Maybe the applicant can.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
applicant
too.
will be involved.
Does the applicant get a rebuttal?
Yes. We're almost
Thank
there.
you.
I think, we're not quite there, we're at 10, which is public agency reports, we've had none of those. Staff recommendation, I think we've heard what I've said, but not,
One
but
thing,
you're coming up, Hal, you're right after, okay? Hang in there.
a basic point of the appellant is that two plats in the upper right corner, where you have what's called a declaration, says that there's in fact, a public street on what is tax lot 1600. In the staff report, on page 20 of 226, there's concern 2, and the findings refer to the partition plat 9549, which split the tax lot 1700 into 1700 and 1703. And then it also has some about partition plat 9323, which is the original 3-lot split of the original 1700. And both of those plats, starting with the application, that was tax lot 1700 is the subject property. And they wanted to split it in 93, and they did, and then they wanted to take one of those and split it again in 95, and they did. The point is, that's 1700. It had nothing to do with 1600, which was owned by the elder Bonnies. So the plat can only do things for the subject property. The plat has no authority to declare easements or roadways or anything else on a property that was not the subject property, and particularly when it's under a separate ownership. And so, despite the plat saying what it says, my understanding is that plat had no authority to tell the elder bodies that they got a public road on their property now. Because they didn't apply, they weren't owner to the subject property, that, their property had nothing to do with either one of those plats.
Jim, it's 9 o'clock, so we're gonna go on, I think, to number 12, rebuttal. Are you okay with that, Council President?
As long as there weren't any public meetings and reports.
There are none.
Okay.
And the staff recommendations you heard from both Jim and myself.
So number 12, rebuttal of the proponents and the opponents. So should we start with the proponents?
Hal, that's you.
Well, the opponents don't get a rebuttal.
Go ahead, Hal, with your presentation for your rebuttal.
Okay, so procedurally, I think things are kind of messed up, but the one thing that I think in this dialogue that's getting very confused with people is public access versus public right-of-way and public street, because they're completely different, completely. And I just want to make that point clear, and the applicant's willing to grant a continuance for a limited period of time on this sole issue only.
Thank you, Hal. I'll work with you on Thursday after that.
Thank you.
We have our meeting. Thanks, Hal.
No, on one issue, and that's it? Access? That's all he's gonna,
Getting an extension for this application is a big deal.
but he said the only thing he's willing to discuss is,
It's his prerogative to give or not give an extension.
And where the city can be sued.
and you're what?
The city is risking being sued, okay? The
I
city
thought there was
itself, or
100,
the application will immediately be granted.
but you said there was 120 days. Somewhere it says there's
We are already beyond that, and
120
we've
day
got-
extension.
Yet no extension.
No, the law is you get 120 days from when the application is deemed complete to a decision and all local appeals. We're past the 120-day period, and the applicant has already granted a 30-day extension. So now we're looking at the 30-day extension ending on September 15. If all the local appeals are not, the final decision by September 15, the state law allows the applicant to file a writ of mandamus in circuit court compelling the city to issue a decision approving the application as submitted.
That's what we're up against. Okay, so we've heard the rebuttal from the proponents and now the opponents, and we have the close of the hearing. So,
Do we have a rebuttal of the opponents?
oh, I think she just gave it, which
Oh,
is about
I
the,
just didn't know if there was any more.
she's saying that that's not enough, right?
That's not enough.
Would city council please opine on the procedural issues here, because the opponents do not get a rebuttal.
Okay, so go ahead and close the hearing.
I close this hearing.
Do we- Before we do that, can we just take a thought? We're willing to close the hearing, and then the next step would be deliberation, but there would be a meeting on this Thursday with staff and the opponents and the applicant to resolve what I heard the applicant say was one issue that they were willing to address.
I believe that will happen in 14, under the deliberation. It's a proposed solution that I've come up with.
Okay.
So they can take that as one of their
And that's
decisions.
after we close the hearing. So, do I say anything more than just like close this hearing?
I would say what time it is.
Oh, 9:01. What is it? 9:01.
I am not
September
available on
6th,
Thursday.
2022.
This is great.
Okay, we're talking about deliberation decision, we talked about the meeting, with the opponents, city council, and, city manager.
City council, too, is at this meeting on Thursday.
Will we all be at that, the meeting? Okay.
I'm just happy to do it, to coordinate it with Judy and Hal and myself, and I imagine Tyler will be there, and Jim. And if either one wants to bring, legal representation, they are allowed to do that as well.
Do we accept the extension?
Well, the city council, yeah, and the city council to accept the extension of the 30 days, Hal can send that to me in writing tomorrow on the one issue. If we feel like on the Thursday, if there's still remaining issues, that can also be discussed as well with Hal if he's willing to grant any time extension, or perhaps there's no time extensions. Perhaps we all come to the table and we figure out things are different than what we thought. We can move forward positively.
Okay, just a clarification, this is Hal here. I'm out of state right now, so please clarify the dates that you were talking about, please.
Yes, so Hal, do you have time on Thursday, this coming Thursday morning? And I'm happy to have you Zoom in.
To be perfectly honest, I think for us to bring a compelling case against the opponents, we're gonna need more time than that.
I think how what we're trying to do is we're just gonna try to talk through it, and try to listen to each other, and you can have more time than to talk about your 3 points that you're trying to make with the access easement and so on. So this
Okay,
is more
that's
like a
fine.
learning session, a listening session, and learning from each other.
Right.
And then we'll design where our actual cruxes are between each other and try to figure out if we can leave the table and come back with maybe a better solution that we're going forward with. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, what time are you guys available? Judy?
I have to work on Thursday, it's the only day this week that I'm required to be at work.
Okay, well, that's the day that we have
I know,
for our team here that we're already in the building.
I can,
Do you wanna send,
so I just see if I can, block out a window to get on a Zoom call,
Okay, that
something
sounds
like
good.
that.
so we could, anytime between, 9 and 12. Call me tomorrow, and then Hal, are you available anytime between 9 and 12? This Thursday?
Yeah, that earlier is better for me, just so you know, so.
Earlier is better for him. Okay, so,
Thank you for both opponents and proponents for getting together and allowing the council to have a little more information to make a decision we hope to be better for both.
So is someone gonna send an invite?
yes, we'll make a will. She's been quiet long enough. Yes, but we'll let Judy tell us tomorrow morning at what time for sure, and I'll email you that out, okay? Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.
Well, we should probably, take a vote on that to continue.
Do we need a motion or?
Yeah.
May I give a shot? I make a motion that we accept the city manager's recommendation to allow the parties to discuss this situation on Thursday and get more information back to us prior to the 15th, because the date that things go awry.
I think, and to have a meeting prior to the 15th.
Yes. And to have a meeting prior to the 15th when things will go fairly wrong.
I second it.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, or maybe part of the recommendation. Okay, so you're better on.
Item 4B, recruitment ideas and a new position. Thank you for coming.
Good night, everyone.
Is the hearing adjourned?
The hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hal.
Very informative.
Appreciate that, thank you.
That, is the same thing, just bigger version as you had in your text?
No, I just took it from Google Earth.
172.
Took it to state.
Okay, that's quite a bit the same though.
It's the same.
No, not yet.
Okay, we're gonna continue on with our meeting.
173. So that is, the ones that is
Thanks, guys.
Are you supposed to look blood sugar?
I was about to pass that. I don't know about anybody else.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, what's going on?
Heidi, you get this position?
Should be handed out?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, and it's all cases out of the.
Yeah, we should always get Jim comments. I mean, counselor comments.
All right, recruitment ideas, new position. So essentially, we are struggling. We are struggling to find a water operator position. And now we've had a resignation of another water operator. So we are just at having one water operator. And that's water treatment, by the way. They do not have, we do not have, somebody doing distribution at this time.
Do we have everything covered?
We're okay, right, Kai?
Yeah.
We don't have anybody doing water distribution at this time. We've just hired for the position. So they're coming on September 20th. So that position was a successful recruitment, and are very excited about that individual coming aboard. We also were semi-successful with the code enforcement. We have a short-term relationship with Russ Vanderwetterly, who was a former Marion County Sheriff's Deputy Sergeant. I think he was a sergeant.
Sergeant here.
Sorry.
He was here.
Sorry, I thought you might need me, so I got it closer.
Through here, so, you know him well.
Okay, yeah. A sergeant, and he also does code enforcement for 2 other cities. He has come aboard, because our other candidates, I realized, do not have a direct code enforcement experience. And let me tell you that your code enforcement program is lacking. And so it is very rudimentary. And what needs to happen is in order for somebody to come aboard and be successful, they have to have someone assist, like at least citations. So we have Russ in, and he is making recommendations. One of his recommendations, is for us to get code enforcement software and it sounds essentially amazing. You have templates that you can pick from, and it generates the letters in a legal format as well, and so that they would be upheld in not just our municipal court, but in other courts as well.
You type in the address and it auto loads everything.
So, but that software comes with a price tag.
$7,500,
$7,500.
depending
I
on
don't
how many
think it's
users.
too bad, but
Is that a one-time purchase
Mhm.
price?
it's a one-time purchase price. A what?
Including the price?
No,
No. But yes, it is a one-time purchase, and it is used by lots of cities that have a professional.
lots of cities. Dallas just started it.
Yes, and so we do have some money, that we put into our abatement fund, so I think we should just use this, we should use that money to purchase this software.
Abatement fund might not have anything in it.
The abatement fund this year has, we have me the budget, was it
$12,000.
12,000? I thought it was more than that.
Maybe I'm looking at last year's, but
I'll look for the. So I think we should go through with this purchase though, the amount of staff labor that's put into generating this is significant. I don't know where that is.
Council's been frustrated with code
Yeah,
enforcement.
it's really gonna elevate it and professionalize
And we
it,
understand.
and it's gonna give you a lot more, it's gonna give you a lot more satisfaction for moving forward. It's also gonna allow the individual that comes in to not necessarily have to create something from scratch. I mean, essentially, we would be saying, hey, you have a pretty good background, let's throw you over here. Good luck to you, bud, you don't have a lot of training. So, this will really help them to be successful. So that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, is the cost of that software and the recommendations that Russ has.
So you've got in your report that he's on consistent training with inquiry, which is great. You have, and you said that Russ was your first choice, obviously for the reasons you talked about. Is your second ranked choice available and ready to come in and be trained by Russ?
They are. Another consideration that I've been getting as of late is to just have it be continuous. It is actually continuously open, just in case somebody comes across it, and or Russ has a change of heart. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to go back into policing. But, so I just have it open, just because in this time while we're going through this little, exercise to get us professionalized, I don't know who is out there. So I don't want to shut the door. So that one is still open until filled. But we do have Ross working for us. At first I thought it was just a couple Fridays, but he's gonna give a little bit more time and he's gonna make some recommendations. We did buy a cell phone already for that position, so Ross is gonna use that and it can be transferred easily to the person that takes it permanently. Kai is out looking for a car or a small truck. Really, Russ thinks that a small truck is good for that one, so that they can load things into the back if needed too, so.
Golf cart's not good enough.
And the book, no, it's gonna be used for the library. But, no, you want them to also, on a very serious note, you do want them to be able to get away fast.
Yeah, it's unfortunate but true.
Unfortunate but true. The library clerk position has been filled. She starts tomorrow, so we're very excited. So you'll have to go see Natalie Miranda. She has been a lover of the Sheridan Library for a long time. She has worked in a bookstore in her past and has very transferable skills with her bookstore background. And that was a really good recruitment process. It was it had the most applicants. It was a very good one. We have Daisha Gibby, who is training as our court clerk here at the office at City Hall. And Omega's been working with her to get her trained, and Michelle. And so the water treatment position, the code enforcement, and I'm missing one other one, is unfilled, so.
Did we maintenance too?
Oh,
Maintenance too.
public works maintenance too. This one has been very difficult to find. Right now, a really transferable, or a way to get into this would be, heavy construction. A lot of it, with your CDL and utility companies and other companies, construction companies going gangbusters. And so as you know, the wage that comes along with that is very high. We made an offer to the man, but it was $15 less per hour than what he's already making. And even though he was driving all the way up to Portland, he realized he couldn't make it. It's very hard to recruit for that position as well. But, what? So we continue to look for that one. We have got actually 3 or 4 more applications very recently for that one. The next review is tomorrow, I believe, almost the 7th. I've lost track. Give me Monday off.
It's tomorrow, yep.
Today was Monday, so I don't know. So tomorrow. But the idea is I have really done a lot of thinking about all of the things, the guidance that each one of you has given me, and the work tasks at hand. And I actually now think that we should stop going after a water treatment operator and that we should focus more on cross training. And what I would like to do, especially with the new opening at the water plant, is I would like to hire for an operations director. And so they would be the manager of both water and sewer. And the person that we would be recruiting would have ample amount of certificates. They would be able to run both the water and the sewer plant. And then allowing that person to come in and look at what we need, and then being able to design their own team. So many openings that we have. So they would need to have a water level 2, a water treatment level 2, a water distribution level 2, a sewer collection 2, a sewer treatment 1. And if they didn't have necessarily all of those, they could be shy by one of them, and we would give them 3 years to get that. They would also need to have a filter endorsement within 1 year, and Kai and I are looking for 5 years of management with experience of water and sewer running the plants. So this would allow Kai to work on so many of the other projects too that we're tasking him with, right down to the crosswalk. Water and sewer master plans, this person would be a great opportunity right away to really get their hands involved and get their knowledge built up around this. So I think instead of recruiting here, we've talked about the sewer plant, maybe you have to manage, Boley says you have to manage, in order to be a supervisor, you have to manage at least 2 people, so keep that in mind. So I think what the idea here would be, instead of having just sewer people, just water people, now we start to talk about cross-training. We start to hire individuals that are able to run both our sewer plant and our water plant, so we're not put into a vulnerable spot again, which is where we are right now. That makes me nervous. So the position, since it's a supervisor position, I would like to start at $78,000 a year. There would be, I do not have the authority to just create positions on your salaries, your salary chart, your salary scale. I do have the ability to move people this way, but I can't just make positions up. So I'm trying to get your blessing for that, since we didn't include it in this. We will not fill for Travis's position then, for the operator and training for water. We will not fill for the operator, the training for sewer. You are giving people the opportunity to get their training and then they go somewhere else. Is what's been happening with those training positions. I feel like we've seen that twice now with individuals in water. So this is my new idea. Yes.
Would you present us with a job description and tell us the money's available? We're probably not our head.
I don't even know that you need to see the job description. I do have it done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the money is available?
The money is definitely available. Especially not filling the other positions.
So what would you like or need from us to get this?
I just only need you to say, Heidi, please go forward with adding the Director of Water and Sewer Operations to the salary schedule.
Heidi, please go forward,
Please,
adding
please go
sewer
forward.
and water operations to the pay scale,
And starting at $78,000.
starting at $78,000.
And I can see we're gonna save so much.
Yes,
that-
we
I
are.
mean, we're not losing money,
You're not
No.
losing.
so.
Second.
I agree.
Not only that, but we're gonna get a lot of things done.
That's wonderful, because
Very
we're a
Great
very,
idea.
very
We need to hire
fragile
daycare.
area.
Having that vision of what we have and what we need and being able to make it.
Thank you,
good enough for us.
thank you for your support.
Give it a whole lot.
I have a question, is that?
Are you voting?
I don't think I get to vote,
I was
they
just
slide the
saying,
mayor talk,
this
oh,
is the
and
question
the
part.
mayor talk.
Yeah, what's your question?
Is that 78,000 so that it fits in with what other director level positions are here, or is that looking out to?
Minus some of these, but yes, the others it does fit.
Are we in line with other municipalities?
That would be, for that position. And that leads us to item, E, later on here.
Will there be any problem with the union?
No, this is a management position.
Okay.
This is a non-union position.
Okay.
The vote.
Any other discussion?
Was there technically?
I don't think there was.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? I'm new. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow, okay.
Item 4C, follow up from the abatement, 106 South Bridge Street.
I don't know what I put into your packet.
You had emailed
See,
the
yes.
property owner.
Oh, yeah, I emailed the property owner, and this is something for Tyler and I to discuss, on Thursday. When he comes, he said in theory he's okay with it, but he's, skeptical about how the, liability would work for volunteers to come onto his own private property. So that's something Tyler and I can discuss on Thursday, but, it is a big offer that we're making for us to take the lead on coordinating the volunteer group to come over to his property and to clear all the bricks. And after you saw the work that we did down there at the water runs, I believe that we can make a really good, big difference on that property. And I would love to have it done, and I'm sure you all agree, before the water gets out there. So hopefully we can do that, so Tyler and I can talk to Kurt and talk about a waiver of some sort, on the 8th when Tyler comes. By the way, we've been making Tyler come here to City Hall every other Thursday from 9 to 12, and his time is definitely filled up. But it is much more efficient, I believe, than going back and forth with people.
Even the waiver that they signed did be great work. So again, for picking up bricks.
You have to sign the waiver
We do
anyway,
a
when
city
they,
liability for.
This is his private property.
that there is a certain, there's a property line that goes, that's probably river frontage, that would require him, he probably still have to have a waiver for somebody just to be down there kind of like cleaning up the riverfront, correct?
Well, so
Waiver
that's what
regardless.
Tyler and I will discuss on Thursday. So we can make this, if we can make this work. So if not, if we cannot get our volunteer groups in there, then Kurt is on, we are still under our abatement order, and I'll go forward with getting 3 price quotes for the cleanup, but our goal is before the river, before the rainy season. Yeah, I think so too. Time goes by so quick. I think I've gotten old. Okay, so that's my report on that. I just wanted to give you a little, FYI. What's going on?
D, item 4D, vote on sewer rates for RV park.
Do you need to make a decision. I am actually recommending slightly different than what Mr. Donovan is recommending. It is very different, very difficult for us to figure out. Unfortunately, we haven't had the best communication already with this developer, partly because it is in the county. It's not really our development project, but it is our water and sewer. As you see, there's already people over there camping, and that was a surprise for us. And so we have sent out their water bill, but we have not sent out their sewer bill. Yeah, the sewer bill will be back billed based on what you guys decide. Water is much easier to charge, obviously, with the meter, but the sewer, in theory, this sounds good, but I cannot, at first, the developers told us there would not be any long-term, and now there is long-term, we're saying, and I don't even know how to do this. Like, at the end of the year, they would submit some report, I don't know, and then how do we know, am I over there with a clipboard, or would we have them give us a bunch of reports? I just think it looks very hard to track, so I just recommend that we do the 50%.
Would you mind if I just make a motion to implement your recommendation?
Thank you.
I make a motion that we implement a flat percentage of 50% for the sewer for the new RV park.
First and a second. Any discussion?
Sounds good.
That's
Thank you.
nice to put a meter on the sewer.
All in favor? Thank you.
Spirit Mountain does that, by the way, they do like, I've had clients that lived up there for a year, and I don't know what their system is, just being FYI, they do long-term out there. Don't really know what it would be, but just sharing it.
I
This
think
is-
it might be more successful.
Is this something that, once we declare, we can or cannot change, or we do the same way we do our regular,
It will go up,
residents?
it will go up based on the cost of living indexes that you use. So this is set to be,
Rate table.
yeah, the rate.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's like
I was
50%.
looking for that.
Essentially creating the category.
Of the single-family residential monthly sewer rate. So as that single-family residential monthly sewer rate changes annually, so will the amount of this, because it will always just be the 50% of that rate.
There's manufactured homes.
It's not an RV park?
RV park and manufactured home park. This is a,
This is an RV.
Which I think it will have more long-term need than they probably realize.
Do we have any clue of what kind of usage they'll have? Or
No, I include watching, I'm sure we all have. So this will feel good to be able to get them built. Okay, thank you very much for your support.
Item 4E, Sheridan employee salary study.
We talked about it, it was, part of the budget process. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to see that we have increased it, about $1,200. It's still in the budget. We added 2 positions, and now I'm asking for the recommendations both of these guys. So I wanted to also give you, the scope of work, so you can look at that. Are you all right with moving forward with the salary survey?
I have 2 questions. How much over, this is a good faith estimate that they're giving us. How much over can they go before we're not gonna say, yeah, we're not paying it?
I have never experienced that with this organization.
Okay, and then secondly, in the same vein, we said this, we're past 14 days from this estimate, so they have to give us a new one before, based on their disclosures.
I'm sure we'll be okay.
Okay, so that's my 2 questions.
I've known the person conducting this study for about 10 years.
Okay.
it's either a good piece of information or a bad piece of
It's very, very good. One of the changes too was that I realized I didn't think that the conclusions were necessary, but after getting to know you, I think that the conclusions are very important. The recommendations, I mean, to speak, if you'll be interested to hear those from the organization. And Ruth has been in this field for a very long time, so she will do a great report. On pages 186 of your packet, I'd like to note that I was not the major page contributor.
Not this time.
Not this time. Page 186, these are the cities that Ruth said that we could pick from, because these are her samples, and so you'll see where the 1, 2, 3, where's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10. Yeah, I don't know, those one, it should be through 10, 1 through 10,
It's 3 above and 7 below.
which equals 10, so, yeah, you're right. 3 above is what our idea is, and 7 below, yeah.
Wonder why Willamina wasn't included at all these cities.
Well, Willamina, Willamina is too small for the sample pool compared to Sheridan. Willamina is about 2,200 in their population, and then she may or may not have, recently done what is this called, a salary study for them.
Salary study.
Yeah. These are ones that she continuously keeps up with, in her little black book, if you will. Always wanted to look at it.
I make a motion that we approve the scope of work from local government personnel services as presented for $7,423.50 for the purpose of a salary survey.
Second.
Have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Thank you. This is gonna be a good thing to do here. Okay.
Okay, under item 4F, council rules of procedure, final draft of resolution.
I yield my time to Mr. Buckles.
I worked with Yvonne and Heidi, Yvonne and Tyler on getting this all squared away with the things I found earlier. And I forgot to get back to Yvonne. The only thing I found that isn't quite right is on page 194. There are 3 spots on there where she missed some spaces. That's it. That is it. Everything else reads to me like exactly what we wanted to do. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Jen.
Yes, Jim and Tyler.
You made Jim show up early on Thursday.
Yeah. Before noon, that's okay.
That's why you didn't find any mistakes.
It was actually a really, really productive meeting.
Good.
I was happy that Jim.
I'm actually really happy that you're gonna have public hearing time frames.
That's a tough one to run in.
Keep us going. That was gonna, house two plates.
We want to, we have to,
No, this is your last, this is like, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah. Because otherwise, we're gonna make a resolution if there's not already one made at some point.
I didn't see one in the packet.
No, I think there might be a drafted one somewhere, so we'll resurrect that
From in
thing.
the past. Okay.
Update the dates, and we'll put it on for your 19th, September 19th.
Okay.
And then
If
it'll
my plane
be
doesn't get
official,
canceled.
and then you've got rules you have to follow.
Then we gotta follow the new rules. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, that's like, we didn't do anything at all, that's it.
Oh.
Good job, Yvonne,
Okay.
Tyler, and Jim.
Thank you for that. Item 5, review of code enforcement tracking sheet.
Okay.
I'd just like to say the same thing I said the last time. This is not bad. You said it's gonna get better. But, a lot of these dates on there, when it says revisit date, this one says August 8th. This says August 30th, so we're closer. So, the revisit dates still haven't been included to see where we're at.
So Kai probably doesn't want me to.
I actually have an extra
You
copy.
feel free.
Kai and I have made
Might not get over me.
a decision that until we get the software and we get all the legal letters legally lettered, then we are not gonna send people to court. So we're going to wait until we get all of our documentation squared away. I know, we do. And we want to do it very urgently, but we do want to make sure that it will uphold. Russ Vanderwettling has guided us, continuously guiding us in a good way through this process.
I want to spend a day with Russ in the car and go around town.
He's not gonna do that for
Oh,
us.
darn.
Yes, but the new person, sure. So we will, Russ is just here to get the
I know.
up and running, squared away, get the new person
Yeah.
trained and to how to enter and use the
You see what
software.
I'm saying?
The software is-
Yeah,
I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just saying, I know each one.
Okay, Kai?
Okay, so I think I know
We'll just swap paperwork, each step.
So I'll check on all of them. But I think I know what some of these are, so we're doing code compliance, not code enforcement. They're two very different things.
Oh, yeah.
So we just recently started doing code enforcement. And we found out that, I haven't done it at all. So neither is Sharon, our guiding light was the city manager, she's done it. So that's kind of how we got the program going, and then Russ came in and had a lot of changes that he recommended, and I've only got Russ 4 hours a week. So he's got probably 20 or 30 hours worth of municipal code review. And then we've got probably close to that, getting the software up and running, and then training someone. So I asked Heidi if we could stop on citing in the court.
So
And,
first I said no.
yeah, and
And I
focus.
was like,
Well, I can't use him, I just don't have him enough, he's just not pure enough to do both jobs, so while he gets the program ready for someone to come in and do it, we're just gonna do enforcement again, but
no,
the
compliance.
compliance, thank you, I misspoke, thank you. So these are the times when it's important, I think, for the council to give us feedback. I'm honestly really happy with the way the program is, if you're not happy, I need to know. So,
The current program you're happy with?
I am happy with it. The town looks amazingly different than it did last summer.
It does look.
I was here last summer and it did not look good. It looks so, I think everybody in the room should give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Because that starts here. It doesn't start out there, it starts in this room. So I think you guys are doing a great job
I think
pushing that, and the city manager is making sure we spend time on it, so.
we don't get to see it as councilors, but you've been sending out a lot of letters, is that correct? I mean,
Yeah,
there's a couple on Madison Street, every corner of Madison, Madison and Bridge, Madison and Second Street. There's some really, and they're still out of compliance, but they're not better than they were. So
yeah, as long as everybody's making progress, we try and give them credit for that and try and give them extra time.
it's
So like I went out and inspected 2 properties today and they made progress on the weekend. So, and probably enough to keep them out of court.
Separate question, how are we doing with the chickens? Everybody's happy with birds are laying eggs and there's no problem?
I haven't come back and met with this,
Great question for Lucy and Rose. They do a chicken inspection.
That one lady didn't want me to come over there yet, Mrs. Houston.
You contacted her?
I think I did. I thought I gave you something, but anyway, the other lady said I could take a picture with the permit done, because that one piece of, and then I asked her if we could take a picture, and then Mary Ann can put it in the bulletin board, and we can put it in our next little newsletter, just showing that it can be a successful venture. And make happy chickens and happy owners.
Yeah, and I'm excited to start on that. We've started whacking people with the code, so she's one of them. Jim,
We
you
should
have,
probably talk for a second afterward.
I know it's pretty, yeah, and I'm just I'll stay 5 or 10 minutes. I know it's probably sounds crazy to suggest it, but I'll stay an extra 10 minutes. If anybody wants to talk about code, we have to.
I'm not,
Yeah, and I've already got half of these answers, so.
yeah, so you're good. My point was that what we get isn't necessarily what's current, and you've already,
Yeah, well, I think this dialogue's important, so
yeah, so
it makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time.
You guys are doing a great job. It's a very, very thankless and hard
Yeah.
career.
It is, but we need it so bad.
And it is also borderline scary.
So,
Thank you.
Item 6, Mayor Council Communication,
Your favorite
project
one?
tracking sheet, set next week's session, topics.
The next work session topic has been set, it's a plan for the homeless plan, right? Action plan, and like the coordination with the churches and other local groups. Do that. Project tracking sheet. Oh, ashtrays in the 600 block, Sheridan Road, Speaking of, the apartment, complex people will be here on September 19th to do a presentation. But they are trying to make efforts for the ashtray issue.
Do we know what capacity the buildings are in now?
They're still at phase 2, right, Kai? The apartments are at phase 2? Sheridan
Yes,
apartments?
we're just starting phase 2.
They have named them, they let the residents name the apartment buildings, so they'll probably share that. They periodically give updates, they're trying to stay in better communication, and it's truly, I think they are. They were one of the panelists,
Yeah, I know, but they didn't speak up, right? They shouldn't.
they were.
They didn't offer it.
Yeah, they did broach the subject, and it didn't seem like we should start it if they.
No, they wanted to speak about their crisis intervention, because I only gave them 3 minutes. So, the crisis services that they offer, they have several, programs there. Anything else?
On the 19th of September, we'll find out about your RFPs for engineering and a real estate broker, is that correct?
Those of you that are on the interview committees, well, I think, yeah, I wrote a little update thing. Those of you that are on the interview committees, what is it, yeah, what day or time do you wanna meet?
I will be gone through the 14th, starting tomorrow.
So tomorrow through the 14th, you're out. I don't know, write on this thing, we need to keep it.
And I will be on a phone communication. Several of those days.
Sounds good. Okay. Lucy, you're on the broker one.
Oh, if you want me to,
Are you, yeah, if you could just tell me times that you're not available. And that's pretty hard to do.
just pick some time after 10 and
It's gonna be after the
12.
14th for sure.
Lucy, after the 10.
Yes, I got a baby coming on the way.
Okay.
It's in the cooker.
Hey, you don't look like it.
I know. Actually, little Sherry.
Roxy, you're on the engineering one, so the 14th, Jenny's on the engineering one too, right?
Yes.
And Lucy and,
Now, my baby's
There.
officially due on the 15th of September, but I don't know if she's gonna make it that long.
okay, all right, Roxy, are you not available anytime?
Are we talking about next week or 2 weeks, what?
Yeah.
After the 14th.
After the 14th.
Ugh.
So that just means the 15th, really, for the RFP for the engineering one.
Okay.
Are you okay for the 15th?
I think so, let me look real quick.
I feel like something else is happening on the 15th, our park and rec. You think that would?
15th is the Thursday?
Yeah.
No, it will not, so guess what?
And also the last day
Work.
for the.
Yeah.
Now let's just hope I don't break down on the way home.
Okay, so the 15th, okay, we'll see how many applications we get and how it works out. We already have one RFP for the engineering. We got some phone calls today, because we're gonna be dropping them off tomorrow.
Good.
Okay.
So whatever happened with that property that they rezoned R2 and they were gonna put 140 apartments, but it's right up next to the railroad tracks, right behind Davis and Auto?
That is
Which number is that?
1 and 2.
The number 1 and 2?
Yep.
So it says, in the industrial district, but they changed that industrial, or is that still part of the still industrial?
The peach color is
Part of it is
the
that.
medium density R2. And number 2, right
Your
here in
next
gray,
one's
is the industrial. So I'd say just look at this little sheet we gave you tonight.
Yeah, I did that up on my computer in color.
I did mine in black and white.
And, you know, is there something that, you know, I mean, like, what's the deal on Sheridan Road? I mean, are we just gonna continue to let people, I don't want to, but continue to come off that road and keep building and putting pressure on that street? I mean, what's the deal?
So that's the goal, every person, every engineering firm that's been in here, I told them that they have 2 things that they have to do right away, and if they do the Sheridan Road, the very first thing, they'll be a hero, and we'll throw them a party. So that's the very first thing that they know that they have to tackle. They have to come in and we have to have a very candid conversation about the size of the current road, the size of the right of way, what's allowed, and what you can do and what you want designed. Whether it's parking on both sides, maybe it's parking on one side, maybe it's parking on no side, maybe it's sidewalks on both sides. We don't have infinity money though, right? So we're gonna have to live within our means, and that's what an engineer's job is gonna be. We ask the current engineers, but, we don't lose anything. So, I'm also positive of the color.
So, I mean, this thing, and, you know, this, and I don't know if I should be talking, so just feel free to say zip, but do we need to kind of inform the planning commission of being aware of the surroundings around the streets that, you know, that they're processing these homes? I mean, it's like driving me crazy.
May I interject? Legally speaking, there are several steps that the city council has to take before you could have a moratorium in place which would allow you to not process additional applications for development. We can't just say at a meeting, the road's bad, so we're not going to approve this application. There's lots of steps we have to do. Public hearings, we have to notice Department of Land, DL.
Could you share that with the Senate?
Well, I can share it with you right now if you want. We have to give notice to DLDC at least 45 days before our final public hearing. The city would have to make written findings justifying the need for a moratorium. We have to hold at least one public hearing on the adoption of the moratorium and the findings that the city is proposing. And then depending specifically on what the scope of the moratorium, there are possibly additional criteria. And the initial moratorium can only last 120 days. And after that 120-day period, in order to extend the moratorium, the city has to make specific progress, identifiable progress towards addressing the issues that led to the imposition of a moratorium. So it's not an easy thing to just throw up and say, we're not.
Temporary. The other way to spend your money, which is maybe more efficient, is to, something Jim and I were discussing this morning, which is to put a requirement into your development code that, for transportation impact analysis, that developers have to present those. So I learned this morning that there really isn't much of a requirement in your code for that. Your code is really antiquated. So
You
what?
say your, it's our code.
Yeah, your code, our code, our code. Our code I left was so beautiful. So anyway, so our code, okay, I'm developing this. Okay, so our code, needs to have a requirement for a traffic impact analysis, which will essentially say, okay, we're proposing 10 duplexes, and then we look up and they have to hire a transportation engineer, then to come and give it to the city staff and to the planning commission, and depending on the level of application, it would go to the city council for approval. But then we would actually look at the numbers of units, and then the transportation engineers, the expert on the subject matter, then look at the surrounding like intersections, the surrounding roads, and how they would be impacted, and they do an analysis to say, oh my gosh, now this is gonna trigger a stoplight, or now this is gonna trigger a roundabout, which I've seen before. Oh boy. And so it can trigger different things, and the city, or it doesn't trigger anything, and the city can be like, are you sure? You know, we wanna have this looked at. And these things go onward and upward into discussions, but just having that foundational report, you need, my recommendation is that that's where we start spending our time, is developing it, or putting in at least this one piece of the code. As much as I wanna update the entire thing, I think what's really needed right now is to at least have this requirement in there. And so then that's something that I need to work with with the planning commission, which they meet next, Monday.
Well, we can't blame the planning commission, they're held to criteria that
Right,
we've,
right.
that we've created, well, maybe not personally, but over years, so.
They got their guidelines and they gotta go by it.
Right,
That's it.
and that's why in the past, when I said, we have to be careful what's going on, because as long as it meets the criteria, we'll never see it. And we will continue to get this influx because of our SGC fees being low, because of many different reasons. So we as a council have got to
We'll have to
look at
run
this. And the first thing
Yeah,
is,
the 72 apartment complex,
didn't know anything about it,
they
is
met the
it met
criteria.
criteria?
Yeah, that should have had a.
So, you know, I just want you to know that my prediction is
Crystal ball, this
Sheridan Road and South Bridge Street, someone's gonna get killed or hurt in the future because of all the traffic coming to that stop sign, and they're gonna get in a hurry, and they're gonna try to do something quick, and they're gonna try to run the dot. And if Joseph's got he saw problems down there at the bargain store, my Sheridan Road and South Bridge Street is going to become somebody's obituary.
I had a young gentleman
I mean, look at all these,
put by me last week.
and look at all these developments, just off Sheridan Road.
Yeah, you're gonna go through a lot of, we need to get ourselves the right engineer. And I think you need to make that one requirement to your development code. This is like the foundations for change. The seeds for change.
Also, I wanna ask Kai, how are we as far as processing sewer and water? Are we at a capacity? Do we have room?
The sewer,
And if we do have room, how much room do we have? And how long is it gonna last? And how are we gonna know?
well, I will attempt to answer this. We have a water master plan and we have a sewer facilities plan that are both supposed to be done by our new engineers. Those are the exact questions that they will answer for you. We do have our water loop going in, also specifically for Sheridan Road, which will dramatically increase the pressure over there.
But we
Do you
still,
want more information? Cause I can.
not tonight, it's just that I wanted kind of know, that we needed that information along with this traffic study and everything else we need. We can't, I don't think we can wait,
For your existing developments, for water and sewer.
because how do we know?
You know through having updated water and sewer master plans.
And you know, there's another thing on Sheridan Road, if you take away the parking on both sides, you know, and I don't have a problem personally, but I always feel for the people. Some of those people down there only have 2 parking spots in their driveway. And if you take away that parking, where is a family gonna come and spend, if they come for a holiday or a birthday?
Yes, a holiday or a birthday are hard, but I will tell you that I drive that road pretty much religiously, especially in the evening, and I look at how many cars are parked on the sidewalk, on the side of the road, and then I look at how many cars are in their driveway. And I have a prediction that if they were to reduce the amount of cars in their driveway, they could fit the cars that they're parking on the curb in their driveway. But you're right, that there is a problem for hosting a birthday party. I guess for the day they can park in their yard.
You know, and there's I mean, I drive down there a lot too, and it's like dodging, I feel like I'm in a game, you know, Pac-Man or something, dodge over here, dodge in between here.
Lucy, you're supposed to stay in your own lane.
I'm supposed to be going, I know, well, part of my problem, I gotta keep it under 40, but anyway, no, I'm just kidding, I don't do that, but, you know, there's a lot of dodgeballing on Sheridan Road,
Yes.
and, you know, I just feel sorry for those people,
Yes.
because it's going to make the value of their homes go down, because there is nowhere for them.
Drive on all these other side streets in Sheridan Road. There is a road transportation issue in the city. Year 2 or 3, I have talked about putting together a street plan. This is also another really good point for the operations director, is to help take some of the pressure off of Kai so that him and I can really start to crack away at these plans. You might be surprised at how much a public works director is involved in the development code.
We go to Kai for asking me every question about traffic, infrastructure, I mean, on and on and on. I mean, that's who we go to. So.
I wanna, we're gonna work with the Delphian School on I think it's a fun project. The assistant headmaster was like, let's talk more. I thought it was fun. So I want to get 2 students, and have them do an inventory of all the street signs, stop signs, one-way signs, don't litter over here signs, this is Walnut Avenue, I'm making this up. And then also put it onto a map, and then we get it to the COG with the GIS person and have it all recorded in there, and then we'll teach them which signs should be reflective and made out of what material. I think it's a really great skill to, it would be really great to have that skill. But, I guess it doesn't sound exciting. I'll work on it.
Do we
It's
have
very
the software for that?
We
Excel
have a
spreadsheet?
no, we will be giving, why I'm pointing to here is because Jim Jackson's office has a GIS person that we have that nice map done, and they can do all of that. Any GIS stuff, we just give them the information and they can enter. Obviously for a price.
Any other council concerns?
Page 226, the very last page, this is just the, we need to start, once we get ready to increase the SBCs, we need to go door to door and pass this one out, right, to everybody.
Yeah, this talking points is something Lucy and I have been working on. The last page.
Oh, the very last page.
Yeah, so you create it for her when she goes out on her, in her, and then when she goes to far reaching across the city. So this is just something I came up with, feel free to edit this away, this is just like a brainstorm.
Oh, that's great, it's what has to happen.
Lucy wanted it
And
on
this
Friday
is-
and I made it Thursday afternoon.
This is, the types of questions people may ask if we are, or could be answered from this record.
And if we could make the other page that big old graph, and it shows that Sheridan's down at the very bottom.
Yeah.
Have that.
But people might like that.
Huh?
People might like that.
Yeah, they do, like, they like a little visual aid.
No, but I mean, they'll like that we're
What is
showing
it?
at the bottom.
But
Well,
that's
say, this is what developers pay.
Yeah, why do they like that? Because
Do
you
you
know,
want to compensate a developer?
Yeah.
See, we can send them all this language until we get the
Yes.
value.
they'd like that if they were paying the fee, $8,000, but they're not paying it.
I don't know that people will think that way.
That's what we have to get across.
That's why I got a
That's our
little drill in the
job.
back of my pocket, a little hole in my back, it's like, I have to get you there and they're
That's our job.
I think we should not be allowed to go this late.
No. That's what I'm all starting to think you.
Hey, when is this thing here, this thing, we got a table
That's your, yeah, we've got 2 tables.
on the
one with
10th.
6 seats and one with
Did
7.
you say that there was
That's
supposed
this Saturday.
did you say there was supposed to, was it this Saturday, really?
Yes.
It was supposed to be, did you say they were supposed to have some kind of a, I don't know,
Mayor Rich has been working on all the awards.
so there's like no little theme or,
You have
It's
to
a
dress
night,
in a ball
it's a
gown.
night among the stars.
Yeah, there you go.
Are you?
Is it
So you
Cinder
can
Rebel?
wear a star costume.
you guys, are you gonna be there?
You're my +1.
All right, then you know when you're gonna act like you know me when you say this.
Never mind.
I was out with him.
I'm looking down my notes to see if everything's got covered. Was there a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Don't want to.
I'm like, I
I
working.
hear water.
Yeah, and Joseph is second.
I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
Oh, my mouth.
I wanted to say that there was enough information and
Recording
even more
stopped.
questions involved in this meeting's packet to spin the heads of a real estate attorney, a title officer, a city planner, city manager, let alone the city councilors that have only had a holiday weekend to digest.
I would recommend that everyone read Heidi's administrative decision. It is 58 pages, but it goes through every criteria that has to be met in order for a park to be approved. There's a lot of other stuff going around, but you've got to look at those 28 criteria.
Where's that?
Heidi's original,
And then the report before
it is
that,
it's in the packet. I don't know.
It's mostly, it's good.
I read the.
Oh,
Well, you
it's
signed it,
in
it's
Jim's.
not-
I know.
It's not like I'm writing to the-
Somebody's name had to be at the bottom, huh?
Well, I did.
Of course.
I wrote ripe enough.
And I'll be the one to say that I asked for this report on Sheridan Road.
See you later.
Bye.
Yeah,